This program was made possible by grants from the John and Diane Laxmi Family Charitable Fund, the Asfar and Maheen Malik Family Foundation, and the Missouri Asian American Youth Foundation.
We don't want to parent how we were parented, yet we want our kids to be successful because we know the rewards of that as well.
Hi, I'm Aisha Sultan, and these are things we don't talk about. Rishi is a 22-year-old recent college graduate. He has a passion for photography and dreams of becoming a professional photographer. Throughout college, he excelled in his courses and built a solid portfolio. However, his parents are both engineers. They've always envisioned him following a more conventional and stable career path, maybe becoming an engineer or a doctor. They believe that a career in photography is too risky and lacks financial stability. This conflict has created a rift in the family. Rishi feels unsupported and isolated, while his parents feel frustrated and worried about his future. I'm joined by child psychiatrist Dr. Afshan Sultana and Dr. Neha Navsaria, clinical psychologist, to help us better understand what Rishi and his family are going through in this hypothetical situation. Thank you, ladies, for joining me to talk about these things.
Thank you for having us.
So how common of an experience is this?
It's a very, very common experience. I think it's a big source of conflict for a lot of our community and a big source of stress for a lot of parents, families, and for children.
Dr. Sultana, why do you think it's so common, especially in Asian American communities, or you can tell me about other communities in which you've seen the same dynamic?
So yes, like Neha said, it's a very, very common situation. It is across cultures and high-achieving families, but I see that more commonly in Asian American families. I think the core of the conflict arises from the differences in values. Value systems are different for the parent and child. Parents are coming from their own experiences of the way they experience their culture and society when they were growing up, and then they have these ideals which are, in our society they're accepted. And in this case of Rishi, seems like they were high achieving. They tried this method, it worked out for them, they were successful, so why would you question them and follow that path?
Why do you think that this is so common?
Well, I think it's a big part of the migration and also the immigration pattern that, like you said, it's sort of two sort of stresses coming together that if this worked before, this is the formula for success. Why would we do something different?
And what are some of the fears?
The fears around
taking a different path.
Well, it's new. I mean, anything that's new is something scary. And especially when you have so many data points where so many other families, like how they're comparing him to other kids, to other families, that if this worked for them, then why would we want to do something different? Or no access to the doing something different data point. That's also something that comes up.
Right. Like when I was coming up, I didn't know very many other Pakistani Muslim journalists. I don't think my parents knew any in this country either. And for me to tell them I wanted to be a journalist and not be a doctor, I think was a little unnerving to hear at first. Tell me how that manifests in some of the communities that you've been part of, conversations, and even your practices.
So it's very common. Again, the presentation of usually when they are in late teens or college students, they're deciding on their careers. And at that point, they notice that there's the child and parent not getting along. He's stressed, overwhelmed, possibly feeling guilty. And because of the stress, again, isolated, withdrawn, and anxious. And that's what brings them to the clinic sometimes in the context of anxiety or depression.
And how do you see this?
Well, and sometimes you see it a little earlier, because I do a lot of work with young children, and even things like the choice to do free play versus more like academic play. There's sometimes a preference that's seen of what has more value and where more of the learning takes place, where in fact, like free play does have a lot of learning. But I think there's a sense it's like the ABCs, the 1, 2, 3s. This is going to lay the foundation for sort of then those next level, middle school, high school, and I think some of the things that you talked about.
So when one of my children was young, I forced them to do Kumon, this math practicing activity. And this child hated it and wrote me a note expressing how much they hated it. But I just felt like, okay, I would have hated it too as a child, but in order to keep up, in order to compete, you have to have strong math skills. So between these two, I mean, eventually I let my child stop doing it, but I wasn't sure really how to handle that for myself.
So from a parent's perspective, I can see you as a parent want the best, want them to be successful.
Right.
Parents want them to not repeat the mistakes they made.
Yeah.
They want to make a easy path for their kids. But that's not always possible. Then you're not letting them grow, make their own mistakes and grow.
I feel like I wasn't very good at math, so I wanted to make sure that my child was stronger in math than I was.
So then you have to, then it again comes back to you have to see where your child's strengths and struggles are. What does he enjoy? Are we overburdening? Yes, if he's behind, get him the right help. That's your job as a parent. But maybe overdoing it, obsessing over it, or maybe that's not the right word, but the child might start feeling pressured.
And how do you know if your child is vulnerable to having their mental health affected by pressure from a parent?
Well, I think it's really important to pay attention to what coping skills that they have developed over time and your role as a parent in developing those skills. So it's like you said, you learn from the mistakes. And I think that's the fear is making a mistake for a lot of families. But that's actually where the growth is allowing your child to maybe navigate that path. So even with Rishi, the example with him, navigating that path and maybe doing something different and learning to figure out for himself, oh, this does fit for me. Oh, it actually doesn't fit for me, and learning to read those cues for himself.
Do you think there's a way that we can support our kids to succeed, but without putting too much pressure on them? What's the balance? How do we do that without causing mental health issues for them?
Yeah, and that's such the conundrum, because I think so many of the next generation of Asian American and South Asian American parents growing up here, they often parent in a way where it's we don't want to parent how we were parented, yet we want our kids to be successful because we know the rewards of that as well. And there's no perfect formula for that, but it's really that ongoing conversation with your child about teaching them how to tune into themselves, teaching them how to continue to be vocal. So I'm glad that your child wrote a letter to you about the Kumon, because that's the first thing I thought of was that child felt comfortable to tell you that, and that's important. So I think just that ongoing talking and communication and conversation about it, and then showing them that as a family, because we are a very familial community, as a family, that we can collaborate and discuss this, but versus not like a one way, I tell you this and you have to follow.
And I feel like that was the hierarchical way that we grew up, is we had to respect what our parents told us. They were telling us for our own good, and to challenge that was
Absolutely.
Not really done.
Yeah.
Communication gap, communication styles are different. That can lead to misunderstanding. Some sort of, I would say, power imbalance. Parents are providing you with resources, so they feel they can affect your decision making. So all that can come into play. And kids can be, like she said, if they don't have good enough coping skills, not feeling confident, shy, quiet, not expressive, then they can take that very seriously, these kind of comments.
So college is so expensive these days. And there are a lot of parents, especially Asian parents, who are like, am I really going to pay this much money for you to get a degree in, I'll say, writing or journalism? Who knows if you'll get a job? Who knows how much your job is going to pay? Are we getting any kind of return on this investment? How do you even talk to a parent who's just coming at it from that mindset?
So this will require a little bit longer answer. It's a great question, because you as parent wants the best for your child, right? What you have to do is, again, sit down, have a conversation, find out what is the core conflict. I think the core conflict is not success. Parent wants success. The child wants success. Seems like in Rishi's case, he's dedicated, he's building a portfolio, he's working hard. These are good qualities to recognize in him. So they both want success, how to go about it. Parents feel this method worked for us, So it should work for you. Why try another path, right? But you have raised a child here who is an independent thinker, and parents should be proud that they raised a child who's confident to make his own path, who is working hard diligently, who's assertive, who's communicating with parent his wants, his desires. He's negotiating. So those are the good skills, qualities they instilled in him, and he's utilizing them. So it's both want success, but different ways of achieving it.
I love how you reframed that rather than my child is not listening or being, wasteful with our resources, instead into a strength. Like my child is becoming an adult who has abilities that I helped instill in him.
Absolutely.
Like that is a completely different way about thinking about that situation.
Yeah, no, I agree that there's talking about the child's strengths and helping them see how those strengths will also lead to success. Because like you're saying, everybody has the same goal in mind, but it's kind of connecting everybody to that goal. And then it's also highlighting the parents' strengths, which you kind of talked about, that there's strengths in their parenting. A lot of times when we think about Asian American parenting and we think like, tiger mom and things, it gets so sort of like one-dimensional negative association that, well, that's Asian American parenting, we shouldn't be doing that. But when you actually dig deeper, there are a lot of strengths with Asian American parenting in terms of sort of developing like that cultural pride. These are things that are actually sources of a lot of resilience for a lot of kids, but it's fine. Each kid has to find their own balance for what that means for them. And it's part of their identity process. And that's kind of a little bit of a messy path. It goes along with adolescence as well. And I think it's hard for for parents to navigate that with their kids at times.
Can you say a little bit more about the strengths of Asian American parenting? Because that's making me feel a little better about myself. And I would love to hear you say a little bit more about that.
Well, I think it's that piece of there is that focus on education.
Right.
It's just figuring out the right balance for it. And then there is that support and there is that warmth. There's there are a lot of studies that make it seem that it's very controlling, but when they actually do a lot of profiles on a lot of Asian American parents, they see that there is, like the control is a little bit, not control, but it's more guidance, that they're involved. There's a lot of involvement over the next steps and the planning, and there's a lot of warmth tied with that. I think there's a lot of assumptions that there's a lot of lack of warmth.
Yeah, and there are studies that's shown that when the parents are involved, the rate of success is high. So obviously you need to be an involved parent. It's the balance.
Okay, so let's talk about something that I think is prevalent but is not talked about as much. How many children in our community end up in a career that they hate because they did it to please their parents? How common or uncommon does that?
I think it's common. Yes, they do end up, going in that direction, which the parents choose because, but eventually, if they are not passionate about it, they don't like it. Of course, it's hard to maintain that career, right?
What do you think, Neha?
No, I agree. It's common. I think sometimes it's some categories where some individuals might go into it because they felt like at the time that that's what they wanted to do and then realize it later on. I sort of anecdotally, I've just seen that with friends and folks in the community. And then for some, it's a clear, like I did this because my parents wanted me to do it.
And then what are some possible risks or like lifelong consequences if you are in a state of like significant pressure, stress? Like, can that affect you in other ways?
Yeah, I mean, it leads to a lot of burnout for your job because you're not passionate about what you're doing and just keeping yourself motivated every day, day in, day out, especially as work-life balance gets more complicated too.
So it's interesting. I've seen both sides actually. I've seen kids who have, chosen a career which they might not be too interested, but they joined and they love it, they like it, or they may drop out and be miserable. But then I have also seen that there are kids who wanted to do what they wanted to do, and they did it for a while, and then they changed careers and professions, and they came back. But I think our generation is you get out of school, finish the school, get a secure job. But there are different ways of achieving that. So in America, we see that people have a certain career, and in their mid-30s, they switch the career again.
So why in our community is it so Why is there so much pressure on figuring out what you want to do when you're a teenager and sticking with that your whole life?
Because so much of it ties to that sort of survival piece of immigrating. And it's this piece that, like when they did a lot of focus groups with a lot of Indian, South Asian, Asian American parents, the motivating factor was we have to make it in this country. And our way to move up, because we know that we have a different skin color. We know that our names are different. We know that we're all very vulnerable. And so much of what parents talk about is that the way to make it is to get that education. And especially when you're talking about a community that's migrated all over, it's that sense that my education still stays with me. I might have lost my home, lost some money, lost my furniture, but my education is still with me. And I think that's that relationship to that education that really pushes everything and it influences the goals that they have. I think what's difficult is that children don't always know that this is what their parents are coming in with. They're just hearing, do your math, work on this, and they're not hearing that piece.
That's such a beautiful way to put it, like our relationship with education being like sacred in a way, right? Because it helped you survive and it's not something anybody can take from you.
Right. It's the value system they're coming from. This is what worked for generations. When we got education, we got prestige or, financial stability. So obviously they want their kids to have that.
And is it more of an issue in America because we just have more choice and more exposure? Maybe in places they came from, there wasn't as much opportunity to just strike your own creative path and do something totally different. Does that play a role in it?
Yes, I think it absolutely does. Like I said, people can change career. They're not thinking about the career as a teenager in college. They may change their profession later on in life. So this is more cultural based, whereas back at home, we had a certain way of doing things and just follow their trajectory. And it's anxiety provoking for parents. Of course, it's anxiety provoking for parents. They don't want them to go through that.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to parents who find themselves in a similar situation or fearing, oh, my child doesn't know what they want to do and they're already 17 and they have no idea what they want to do and it's causing me stress and anxiety?
So really taking the time to, learn from their child what they're thinking about it, because sometimes they might be thinking that their child has no idea what they want to do, but their child might have some ideas. They might not be, comfortable to share all of them, like the things that they do want to do. And supporting your child in sort of researching what those ideas are, or learning through others in your community or somebody you might work with, like, hey, do you know somebody who does photography and what's there, and kind of exposing, because the biggest thing that we can give to our kids is support and curiosity and interest in what they're doing, even if that's the path that they don't choose to take.
Right.
Instilling that in your child gives them a skill of confidence that they can take that with them
to whatever career they decide to do.
Absolutely. Yes. Having those qualities is important because you may go in that career, but if it doesn't work out, you can pick yourself up again because you're self-confident. You believe in yourself, and then you can take yourself forward from there.
So, Dr. Sultana, what advice would you give to students or young people who find themselves in conflict or they're in a fear of disappointment of their parents?
Again, yes, I see a lot in my practice. I see a lot of students, medical students and law students, a lot of students in college-going age. That's a very stressful situation for them because most of these kids realize what their parents had to go through to provide for them. So, but they have their own likings, so they're feeling very guilty that we're not doing that. So the stress takes a toll on them. And I encourage them to, hey, sit down with them, explain to them where you're coming from, if they can understand, and of course, every parent loves their kids, want them to be happy, but the way you communicate, respect what they're saying, acknowledge that you understand what they're saying, where they're coming from, but that you have these desires and you can make it work. And if not, you're counting on their support and to move forward. So communicating with them, in certain cases, if the communication is not working, yes, sometimes family therapy helps, having parties sit down and communicate to each other. Individual therapy for kids, for the college student, so then they can develop, if they don't have those communication skills, they can develop those communication skills to talk to them and advocate for themselves.
That's what I was going to ask you. How does this work in a family therapy setting? Does the therapist take sides and say you should listen to your kid or you should listen to your parent? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so in general, family therapy, it's like you're treating the family as a unit. I mean, sometimes you feel like you're pulled in different directions, but you're treating sort of what is causing the rift in the relationship or the communication pattern. So a lot of times, like I always say, it's like directing traffic when you're having them talk. So something's going to come up in a family therapy session, and you're going to show the family how to talk about it, because there've been ingrained patterns of how families talk about things, and sometimes they're effective and sometimes they're not effective, and it's kind of like passed down to families.
Can you give an example?
Well, it's like what we talked about with like the hierarchies of that. Well, I'm your parent and you're supposed to listen to me.
Okay.
And this idea of actually stepping back and listening, like you just summarized, listening to what your child is saying to you. So sometimes a family therapist might encourage the parent to say, okay, just pause for 1 second. I really want to hear what you have to say. Can we just pause? Can you tell me what you just heard from your son? So that's the directing of traffic. Because sometimes as a parent, you don't have a manual on how to raise your child and have these conversations. So you need that guidance.
Right. And I think some parents might be fearful that, if we go to an American therapist, they're just going to tell them, do what your heart desires and don't even worry about it. And so there's a reluctance to even take that route because they're afraid they're not going to like what the therapist or psychiatrist has to say to their child.
Yeah, that is a common fear, that this is the American way of thinking, that just do what you want to do and everybody's free and that's it.
Right, exactly. Right. And one thing I would say, as a child of immigrants myself, I saw this on social media somewhere and it resonated so much with me that at a young age, I internalized what my parents gave up, their families, their culture, their homeland, just so that their children could have a better life here at a very young age, right? And so I feel like I spent a lot of my adolescence wanting to prove that it was worth it to them. How common is that of an experience?
Extremely common. Yeah. That's where the guilt, the stress comes in. Because, every parent is good. They're raising good kids. Sometimes they're not confident of their parenting, but they have instilled all those qualities and they are, caring kids. So of course they worry about or they care about what they had to. But that buildup of pressure, imagine the responsibility. I did all this for you and now you have to produce results and I'm not there or I don't like it. How do I help them? So it's.
Is that something common that you've heard from other people? Is that...
The guilt piece, and it's kind of like the success and the guilt go hand in hand, is commonly like what you hear is that you achieve the success, but there's something attached to it. And I think it's sort of the narrative that gets continued and passed down because of the stories of migration and immigration and sort of what, like you said, what families have to give up. It is quite common. It's not talked about enough, though.
So, and then to approach that, that's what I do with my kids too. I help them understand what are the struggles we had to go through, but every parent does that. So I did it too. It shouldn't be a burden to you. I'm just helping you realize so that you realize, what it takes to raise a family, to do everything, or to achieve a career, just to help you understand. Not that it should be it should be a burden to you. So I'm not coming from that perspective. I clarify that. I'm not coming from their perspective. I'm just helping you understand that it takes hard work.
Well, and I agree that majority of parents love their kids. They want the best for them. But in our community, isn't there also some status oriented for the parent by what their kids end up doing? Like, the name brand school, the high paying job. And how prevalent is that? And what role does that play in anxiety and other problems we create for our generation of children?
Yes, that's adding to the stress because these are parental dreams, goals, and they are projecting it over to the kid, and kid has to, then there's another layer of now they worked hard, they moved here, they're doing this, and now they expect certain results. So that's adding a layer of anxiety and stress.
Yeah, how do you think that community pressure weighs in?
I mean, it's sort of part of the natural flow of there's the familial pressure and then there's the community pressure, and that's like the norm. And so I think it's important to figure out ways that we can use the community in a more positive way to sort of support things. So it's finding out more folks in the community that are doing some of the things that your child might be interested in. But yeah, it's a hard piece. It's a hard challenge to overcome when that community talk is constant, and you're kind of dreading, there's sort of like the joke of like, I'm dreading going to the party because aunties are going to say this and things. But there's a lot of truth behind that too. So even also prepping your child, like when you have to go into those situations, that you can proudly tell them that you're doing X, Y, and Z. But I think parents have to also feel proud of it too, to be able to go there.
Right, because your child can feel if you're not proud of it, or you're embarrassed.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Like, my child wants to be a journalist of all things,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you're proud of your child, then it will reflect, and they will take it, and then they can go with it, and they will be confident in meeting the community at large.
And I like what you're saying, that part of our community conversation around this also has to change, where parents don't have to feel like embarrassed or hesitant if their child doesn't quite know what they want to do, or they want to take a different path or choose teaching or something else that, doesn't carry the same status, perceived status, as what is most valued in our communities. Right?
Yeah, and the conversation has shifted over time, I will say, but there's still, it still can like default to that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on this show and talking about the things that we don't talk about. When I started, there were not very many Asian American journalists, and now there's a ton. Talk a little bit about how change happens in communities like this.
It's definitely the exposure and the talking about it. That's why it's so important that whatever voices can get in there to say something and to kind of elevate those careers,